He had lived alone for many years. His small cabin stood at the edge of a quiet forest, where the trees whispered in the wind and birds sang early in the morning. The man had chosen this life long ago. After years of city noise and endless crowds, he had wanted peace. He wanted a place where he could hear himself think, a place where the world outside did not demand his attention. His days were simple, yet they were his. He woke with the sun, brewed a strong cup of tea, and walked to the river nearby. There he fished quietly, watching the water flow over stones, listening to the soft rustle of leaves. He grew vegetables in a small garden, and he kept a few chickens that wandered freely around his yard. Most people would have called his life lonely, but he did not feel lonely most of the time. He had learned to enjoy his own company. He read old books, mended his clothes, and even carved small wooden figures which he kept on shelves in his cabin. Still deep inside, he sometimes felt a quiet emptiness. He had friends once, a family even, but life had moved on, and now it was only him. Yet he had accepted it. He thought he had everything he needed until one sunny morning changed everything. The day began like any other. The sun was bright, and the birds were especially loud, almost as if celebrating the start of spring. The man was gathering firewood near the edge of the forest when he noticed movement in the trees. At first he thought it was only a deer or some other small animal. But then 5 figures stepped out onto the open ground, walking slowly toward him. They were young and strong, and their presence immediately made the man tense. He had not seen a stranger in years, let alone 5 at once. "Hello," one of them said, her voice soft but clear. She smiled politely, and the others followed her lead. The man did not answer immediately. He studied them carefully. They were Apaches, he realized, noticing their distinctive clothes and the way they carried themselves. Something about them was different, not threatening but unusual. They looked tired, as if they had traveled far. The man's first thought was to send them away. After all, he had chosen solitude for a reason. Visitors brought noise, disruption, and sometimes trouble, but there was something in their eyes that made him pause. They seemed polite, respectful, and honest. "We are travelers," another spoke, his voice calm. "We mean no harm. We only ask for a place to rest for the night." The man felt a tug in his chest he had not felt in years. He had always been kind, even when he lived alone. He knew he could not leave them outside in the cold forest. So he stepped aside and gestured toward the cabin. "You may stay," he said quietly, though his voice shook slightly. "Just for one night." The 5 Apaches smiled gently, grateful for his generosity. They stepped into the cabin carefully, looking around at the simple furniture and the wooden walls. The man watched them, curious. He could not remember the last time he had company. Their presence filled the small cabin with new life. They talked quietly, asking polite questions about the cabin and the forest. They seemed genuinely interested, but also careful not to intrude. The man noticed small things, the way one of them neatly arranged firewood, the way another carefully set his plate at the table. He realized they were not used to trouble or carelessness. They respected his space even as they made themselves comfortable. That night he prepared a simple meal for them, some vegetables, eggs, and bread he had baked himself. The Apaches thanked him warmly, and the cabin felt warmer than it had in years. After dinner they sat together by the fire. One of them, a young woman, spoke softly about their travels, telling stories of the wide lands, rivers, mountains, and towns they had passed through. Each story was full of life and adventure. The man listened, fascinated, feeling as if he was seeing the world again through their eyes. He noticed her first. She had a gentle smile, and her eyes seemed to notice everything. She listened carefully when he spoke, and when she laughed, it was like sunlight entering the room. He found himself wanting to hear more of her stories, to watch her expressions, to learn about the world she carried with her. The others were interesting too. The cheerful one who always made jokes, the quiet thinker who watched everything carefully, the protective one who looked after the group, and the observant one who seemed to understand people with a single glance. But it was her who quietly captured his attention. The days passed slowly, but each one brought new surprises. He taught them about the forest, where to find berries, which plants could be used for medicine, how to track animals without disturbing them. They shared their own skills too, how to make small tools, how to cook over a fire in creative ways, and even songs they had learned in their travels. The man had forgotten how enjoyable it was to share knowledge with others. Their presence awakened something inside him, something he had buried for a long time, the simple joy of connection. Though he did not admit it to himself, the young woman, was changing his world. She noticed small things about him, the way he moved when chopping wood, how he carefully tended his garden, how he smiled at small animals. She asked questions, showing interest in his life, his thoughts, and even his past. He felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness. It had been years since anyone had truly cared about him in this way. He wanted to talk, to share more, yet he feared opening up too much. One afternoon, the travelers decided to continue their journey. The man felt a pang of sadness he did not expect. The Apaches packed their belongings and prepared to leave. They thanked him for his kindness, for the shelter, for the warmth of his home. The man nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He had grown attached to their presence, especially to her. "Will you stay a little longer?" he asked quietly, almost hoping she would say yes. She looked at him, her eyes calm and full of meaning. "If you wish it," she said softly, "I will stay." For a moment, the man could not speak. The cabin, which had once felt so quiet and still, now felt full with the promise of new life. He realized that for the first time in many years his life might be changing. The forest outside, the river, and the birds remained the same, but inside the cabin, something new had begun. He watched her settle in, arranging her things carefully, respecting his space, and yet leaving a mark on the cabin that made it feel warmer. They began to share more meals together, sit by the fire, and talk late into the night. He found himself looking forward to her presence, to the small gestures that showed care and attention. Her laughter became a sound he could not imagine living without. At night, as he lay in bed, he thought about the years he had spent alone. He realized that solitude had been a choice, but perhaps love and companionship were also possibilities. He felt a quiet hope growing inside him, the kind of hope that makes the heart feel lighter and the mind more open. The days ahead were uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he was eager to see what would come. Life had brought him strangers, travelers seeking shelter, and somehow from their presence a new chapter had begun. One person had stayed. One person had brought warmth, connection, and the quiet promise of love. And for the man who had lived alone for so long, that was more than enough to change everything. Life in the cabin slowly changed after she decided to stay. The man who had lived alone for so many years now found himself waking up to the quiet sounds of another presence. At first it felt strange. He had been used to complete silence, to mornings where only the birds and the wind accompanied him. Now there was laughter, the soft shuffle of footsteps, and the warmth of someone preparing tea beside him. He felt a mixture of nervousness and joy, a sensation he had forgotten existed. The woman was patient and gentle. She did not try to force herself into his life, but she shared her days with him naturally. In the mornings they would walk to the river together, she helping him carry buckets of water or gently suggesting a new way to arrange the fishing nets. She had a curiosity that matched his own, asking questions about the forest, the plants, and the animals. At first he answered cautiously, unsure how much to reveal. But gradually he began to enjoy her company. He liked explaining things, seeing her eyes light up with interest and hearing her thoughtful comments. As the days passed, they developed a rhythm. They worked together in the garden, planting seeds and watering vegetables. Sometimes she would hum a soft tune while she worked, and he would find himself smiling quietly, realizing he hadn't smiled this freely in years. They prepared meals together, sharing small stories while chopping vegetables or stirring pots. He noticed how careful she was, not only with the food but also with his feelings. She seemed to understand him in ways he could not explain, sensing when he was tired or worried, always offering comfort without demanding anything in return. It was not always easy. At times their differences became clear. He had grown used to routines and quiet, while she was lively and sometimes spontaneous. There were small moments of tension, like when she rearranged a corner of the cabin or tried a new way of cooking that he did not immediately like, but they learned to navigate these moments together, discovering that compromise and patience could make their lives smoother. He found that her energy brought new joy to his carefully ordered world, while his calmness helped her feel grounded. One afternoon they went into the forest to gather firewood. She picked up a small branch and examined it curiously. "Why do you like this forest so much?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "It's quiet here," he said slowly. "I can think. I can feel the world without it pressing on me, but now, it feels better because you are here." She smiled, and for a moment there was a silence that felt full and comforting. They carried the wood back to the cabin together, side by side, speaking little but feeling connected in ways that words could not fully express. As weeks turned into months, their bond grew deeper. He began to notice small gestures from her, a gentle touch on his arm, a quiet smile when he said something thoughtful, a look that seemed to say, "I am here for you." He realized that he had fallen in love, though he never expected it. He had spent years believing he could live alone, but he now understood that love was not a disruption. It was a gift. It made life brighter, fuller, and more meaningful. They shared stories about their pasts. She spoke of her family, of journeys she had taken, and of dreams she still carried. He opened up about his life before the cabin, about the friends he had lost contact with, and about the solitude he had chosen. Sharing these memories felt natural, as if they were building a bridge between their hearts. He felt seen in ways he had not felt in years, and he noticed that he could see her more clearly too. Not just her beauty, but her kindness, her patience, and her courage. Life together also brought practical challenges. One winter morning, a heavy snowstorm blanketed the forest. The man had learned to survive alone in difficult weather, but now he had someone depending on him. They worked together to ensure the cabin stayed warm, chopping extra firewood and clearing snow from the path. The woman helped in her own ways, fetching water, preparing warm meals, and keeping spirits high with her laughter and stories. That storm, instead of causing fear or isolation, became a moment of teamwork and trust, strengthening their connection even more. They also discovered simple joys together. They would sit by the river and watch the reflection of the sun on the water, sometimes skipping stones or letting the birds land nearby. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, reading from old books or simply talking about the day. She taught him to appreciate small surprises, a flower growing in the forest, the colors of the sky at sunset, the sound of the wind through the trees. He taught her patience, resilience, and the beauty of routine and observation. Together, they created a balance neither of them had experienced before. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, he realized how much his life had changed. Sitting by the fire, watching her hum a gentle tune while folding clothes, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. His days were no longer empty or predictable. They were filled with warmth, laughter, shared experiences, and mutual care. He understood that love was not only about grand gestures, but also about these small, consistent moments of attention and respect. The woman noticed the change in him too. She had seen his initial hesitation, his careful boundaries, and his quiet routines. But now, he laughed more freely, shared stories about his past, and even allowed her to rearrange parts of the cabin. He had become more open, more willing to connect with the world outside his walls, and more confident in showing his feelings. Her presence had transformed his life in ways he never imagined. Their companionship grew into a deeper love. It was a love built on trust, patience, and shared respect. He could feel it in the way she looked at him, in the gentle hand she placed on his shoulder, and in the way they shared silent moments that felt full of understanding. He no longer feared vulnerability because he knew she would meet him with kindness and care. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, not only in body but in spirit. The seasons changed, and life continued in its quiet, comforting rhythm. Spring brought flowers, summer brought long walks and fishing trips, autumn brought colorful leaves and harvest from the garden, and winter brought cozy nights by the fire. Through all of it, they grew together. They laughed, shared meals, solved small problems, and comforted each other in times of worry. He discovered that the life he had once thought complete on his own was far richer and fuller with her by his side. Eventually, he realized that the cabin, once a symbol of solitude, had become a home filled with warmth and love. The forest, the river, and the quiet mountains remained as they were, but inside everything had changed. He had found a companion, a partner, and a source of joy that he had not known was missing. The man who had lived alone for years had discovered that life could bring unexpected blessings, sometimes in the form of strangers who became family, and in one special person who chose to stay. As they sat together one evening, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear sky, he turned to her and smiled. "I never thought I would live like this again," he said softly. She smiled back, taking his hand. "Life has a way of surprising us," she replied, "and sometimes it brings exactly what we need when we least expect it." In that moment, he felt complete. The quiet emptiness that had lingered in his heart for years was gone, replaced by love, companionship, and hope. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges and surprises, but he was ready to face them, not alone but together. The forest, the river, and the mountains remained witnesses to their story. A story of connection, trust, and the unexpected gift of love. And so, in a small cabin at the edge of the forest, a man who had lived alone for years found a life renewed. Through patience, understanding, and shared care, he discovered that even the quietest hearts could open to love, and that sometimes one person's choice to stay could change everything.